half a car, that is. She bought the other half. I paid my own gas and car insurance and paid for my repairs whenever they were needed. It was a 5-year-old car after all. And I was one of the associates that got promoted the fastest. In 6 months, I was a senior customer service associate. Leadership starts early. I was doing voids and returns. I was doing cash handling. I carried a key on my neck in order to close the store at night. And I got an award for excellent customer service. So how did these jobs mold my future? I was able to focus on achievement in extracurricular activities because there had to be more to life than working, right? You don't just go to school to work, and you don't just work to live. You have to enjoy life too. There was an element of financial education and literacy. Where should I put a little money so I have savings in the future so I don't continue doing this job in the future? How do I balance savings and investing, spending, which I did plenty of, and donating? They're valuable work skills. We talked about some of these, but interviewing, networking, exposure to future career paths. You know, you start having chit chat with people while you're processing the return or whatever it is. What do you do? You know, that kind of stuff. I learned how organizations operate, how audits work, for example, how inventory works, how to treat customers. I learned about consistency and the value of a schedule. What happens if you're tardy? If somebody's waiting to come off shift and you need to come on shift, what happens? I learned to build up some confidence and become a team player, and which leaders to follow, who would give me good advice and who would give me marginal advice or perhaps even detrimental advice. I learned about procrastination, which is a key thing that teens do during school, and it has an impact on their grades because they put things off, and then it piles up and something has to fall. My next job was the longest job I ever held, if you believe that. I'm not one of these career employees at an organization. I worked 7 years as a pharmacy technician, all through college, a few years before and a few years after. So I did all 3 of these jobs that you see here. That's not me in any of those pictures. The guy on the left, he's talking to the lady, right, the customer. He has to show compassion and empathy. Fast customer service, right? Perhaps somebody's calling and they want a prescription and the delivery driver is about to leave. So you have to go drop it off yourself. Handling cash, talking to doctors, being professional on the phone, and also making sure that you capture everything that they tell you. And doing it all, right? From throwing out the trash, to filling the stock, to dispensing the medication and talking to customers. Terminology, medication terminology, ailments, things like that. I learned all kinds of things that are even valuable today. Acetaminophen, right, versus ibuprofen. Accuracy, being detail-oriented, not just in counting pills like that, which now machines do for the most part, but also accuracy in making sure you pull the right medication and things like that. And in the summers, I was working 70 hours a week, right? Because I would pinch it and help out as other people would go on vacation. As the full-timers were gone, I'd be called in to support their shift as well as do mine. So the question comes up, so shouldn't you encourage your children to study and then start working? Plenty of my friends and cousins have done that, but they didn't do any dual, what's the word, threefold, they weren't, I don't know how to tie that in. But there's a value in higher education. There's a value that you gain from working, which is that you learn the value of higher education. You don't want to do this the rest of your life, you better go study, right? You learn to be tenacious and stick with it. Whether this is sticking with school and finishing, sticking with the task at work, memorizing Quran, excelling in sports, whatever it is, you learn grit. You learn to do the tough jobs, the ones that nobody else wants to do, cleaning. You create students that have experience with the real world rigors, real life experiences. There's a cross-cultural capacity and capability that you learn. The team dynamic, which is so prevalent these days, you learn what that is, how to work together in a work group. You learn social skills because there's all kinds of people, again, that you deal with in all different settings, not just at the register, as I mentioned here. Communication skills, typing skills, problem-solving skills, dealing with difficult customers. Okay, I'll just let the title sink in and speak for itself for a minute. It's not appropriate for my daughter to work. Well, what exactly is the issue that you have? Is it you? Is it your understanding of Islam? Is it something else? Let's dig into this a little bit because this is something I've heard. I have a mother, I have a wife, I have a sister, I have a daughter, I have aunts, I have nieces. Girls need the same skills that guys do when they're in this age bracket. They need to learn the same life lessons. In fact, you might even say it's more important for them to learn the soft skills, or as important, plus they also need to learn the soft skills, the skills of empathy, to be able to discern and distinguish who's telling the truth, who's not, nuances, to learn accountability, to learn to veil, right, which is covering other people's mistakes, right, your teammates' mistakes. When they do something, how do you help them out? To have a backbone and call out that teammate when they're doing something that they're not supposed to. So what can we do to help her find a safe organization? Maybe we find a workplace that's public facing, so there's plenty of people. Maybe we find a role that's work from home. It's so easy nowadays. Maybe they can volunteer in a known safe place. Maybe they can work for the dean, lead a club, lead an organization. Maybe they can work for a business that's owned by a family member. Maybe they can work at home, right? Be an employee in the house at a certain time. These are your responsibilities. This is your shift. This is your rate of pay. And the skill development is still there to some extent. Ideas, right? This is to promote thought. And that's where I'll bring my talk to a close. Next steps. Did your perception change after you heard this? Why? Why not? Why didn't it change? What was it that was coloring your perception? Is there something else? Is there a cultural assumption or other type of veil that is blocking how you're thinking? Where did that come from? What's the priority for you? Is it just education? Is it education with experience? What is the timing? If a person's going to find a job in your household, when are they going to find it? At 16, at 15, at 18? What's appropriate? What guardrails do you as a parent need to put in place? Do you as a person going into the workforce need to put in place? What additional structure do you need to support that? Maybe you need to add a savings account, not just carry a debit card. Maybe you need that debit card, not just carry your dad's credit card. What are the side effects? Are you going to have to be able to go in the middle of the storm and pick up your son at 10 o'clock at night because he's working at that odd job at that place down the street and it's so annoying to you? But what are the things that they're learning? And you have to act as a support structure for them. Who else is going to have to make adjustments? And if it doesn't work out, how do you measure success, right? These are corporate terminologies. What are your success metrics? What are your KPIs? What are your lessons learned? You, again, as the young person who's going to go work, as well as the mentors for that person, the parents, the people around them. What are you going to ask about? How was work? And how do you recognize the achievement that they are gaining? What's their contribution? How do you measure that? Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless them. What a wonderful speech, mashallah. A lot of benefits. And I myself have a question for you. That question is, I prepared. Actually, I totally forgot, and I will ask you alone, inshallah. Individually, I forgot. This is how you learn, right? If you don't write it down, you forget it. Okay. No, thank you very much. And I wanted to move to the third speech. Sister Amina Koshal, with the title of this speech is Muslim Minorities Across Oceans and Centuries. Amina Koshal, she graduated with global studies, and also she studied a lot in Morocco. So let's welcome our sister Amina Koshal.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. My speech is Muslim minorities across oceans and centuries. So before we get started, there are just 2 points I want to make. First of all, Islam is not a monolith and Muslims are not monolithic. So everything I say here is not representative of all 16th century Spanish Muslims, nor is it representative of all 21st century American Muslims. And the second point I want to make is that much of this presentation, the research is based off of the doctoral thesis of Dr. Amina Nawaz. And her thesis, it basically studied 16th century Morisco devotional or religious writing. And it gives us a fresh perspective and really challenges the idea that the Moriscos were this persecuted insular community that were, secretive and living in fear. So without further delay, let's get started. Okay, so the Moriscos, who were they? I'm just going to give a brief historical background. So in the 8th century, what we know as Spain and Portugal today was conquered by Muslim armies. And upon this conquest, some of the people living in that area converted to Islam. And we know this history well. Those Muslims, they oversaw a golden age, a period of great scientific and technological advancements. And that society is a model for multi-religious, multicultural societies to this day. However, about 8 centuries later, in the 16th century, the tail end of the Spanish Inquisition was happening. And the Spanish Inquisition is basically a tribunal. It was founded by the monarchy, and it was founded to uphold the religious orthodoxy of the Spanish Empire. So that means Muslims were faced with a choice. They could stay and convert to Christianity, or if they refused to convert, they're faced with either death or exile. Now we're going to compare that to American Muslims. And we're pretty much familiar with this information. We're 1% of the population, 3.5 million people. About 3/4 of those 3.5 million are immigrants or children of immigrants, and mainly from South Asian, Middle Eastern backgrounds. And the remaining quarter are considered US natives or people who have been here for more than 3 generations. And generally, we're talking about African Americans when we say that. Now, let's establish some similarities between the 2 groups. First of all, it's very obvious. They both assumed a minority status. Okay? They were both othered through politically motivated means. And what do I mean by othered? I mean that they're viewed as incompatible with wider society by virtue of being a religious minority. Okay? They're identified as a common enemy, and they're essentialized as violent and backwards. And we're very familiar with all of these stereotypes. So they're essentialized as posing a threat to Christian values and way of life. So in 16th century Spain, that means anyone who is not Catholic is facing some level of persecution. Okay, they're seen as tainting the religious purity of the empire. And today, the alt-right is convinced that we are somehow threatening the religious uniformity of this country, that we're waging a war on Christmas, whatever that may mean. So I put a picture of Bill O'Reilly. I'm sorry I'm showing you his face in a sacred place in a house of worship, but I wanted to liven the slides up a little bit. So the next point in common is that they were subjugated by a dominant authority, but it's important to note subjugation faced by the Moriscos was obviously more intense in nature. Like I said, they're facing death and exile. There were a variety of experiences. And the last point is that they assumed a favorable economic standing in the societies that they lived. So, of course, like I mentioned earlier, this is not representative of all experiences, but Moriscos faced a sizable group of Moriscos faced, they occupied a place of favorable economic standing, and the same can be said for American Muslims today. So here, we're just looking at the similarities in more detail, and I put it side by side to really drive home this comparison. So first of all, the Moriscos are subjects of a Catholic kingdom, okay? American Muslims, on the other hand, American Muslims are citizens of a secular nation state. The Moriscos are essentialized as greedy and insincere converts to Christianity. And American Muslims are essentialized as violent and backwards. Why are the Moriscos othered in the society that they live? Well, they're othered so that they can be expelled to consolidate the power of the Spanish Empire and to establish its identity as staunchly Catholic. Why are American Muslims othered? Mainly to dehumanize them and to justify the imperialistic exploits of the military abroad. Now we're going to go into some of the challenges that they faced. Obviously, we covered that the Moriscos face, either death or exile, varying forms of persecution. They had social restrictions imposed upon them. Being a Muslim is outlawed, so you can't speak Arabic, you can't pray in public. Even bathing on Fridays is seen as suspicious. You can face consequences from the Inquisition. They're facing a tax burden, etc. What about American Muslims? So I think the main way that Muslims are targeted, and we're all familiar with this, is through misrepresentation in the media, but then also at a deeper level, we're targeted by the carceral state. So that means racial profiling, it means increased surveillance and detainment. Now the Moriscos, as far as their economic position went, they worked in trade related to the fine arts, which was very big in 16th century Spain. And American Muslims, 24%, according to the Pew Research Center, report being at the higher end of the income scale. So the Moriscos are dealing with repression of the Inquisition, and they occupy a very precarious position in society just by choosing to practice their faith. Okay, now that we've established a basis for comparison, let's look at the Moriscos in more detail. So this is a screenshot taken from the Cambridge Muslim College YouTube channel. Dr. Nawaz did a series last Ramadan about the Moriscos. And so what we see here is one of the manuscripts that she studied. And it says, when you enter the church, when you cross yourself, say, and then in the italicized writing, you can see it says recite this prayer, right? Subhanallah, alhamdulillah. And then, if you go further, it says, when you are prompted to kneel, because when you pray in church, you have to kneel, you say the surah of Alhamdu, and you say the surah Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun, and you say the surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So what are we seeing here, really? They have taken the ritual of Islamic prayer, and they have converted it into a format that is compatible with the church. Okay? So they are praying covertly. They have not let go of their Islamic faith. So even they're faced with the brutality of the regime, the cruelty of the Inquisition. their very existence as a religious minority is under threat. But they are holding steadfast to the rope of God. And it is inspiring to see how this community remains committed to their faith. And this point especially should prompt us all to self-reflect. So here's a detailed slide of the way the Moriscos navigated the times that they lived in. So as we saw, the creativity in their forms of worship, right? So reciting Surah Fatiha while kneeling in church. Some Moriscos were required to keep Christian iconography in their homes, so pictures of famous figures from the Christian faith. So how did they circumvent this? The Moriscos chose figures that were prevalent in both Muslim and Christian faiths. So an example of that would be Maryam alayhi salam. Okay? And then 16th century devotional texts. So like the example I showed you on the previous slide, many of those texts that were uncovered from about 500 years ago, they include litanies, prayers, invocations, and they provided religious instruction. And this instruction was of a very high quality. It went beyond the bare minimum. So what does this show us? It shows us that they were committed to Islam. Dr. Nawaz says there were no legal or theological maneuverings to develop a minority legal discourse, which means they fulfilled their obligations. They did not dwell on their minority status. They did not fret over their minority status. And they engaged deeply with the prophetic tradition, and they maintained a hopeful outlook on life. They did what had to be done. Now, what are the differences? This slide is critical, but it's also self-reflective and self-implicating. So the Moriscos prioritize what should be done while facing impossible odds, right? So like we said, they fulfilled their religious obligations. They never lost sight of their true purpose, which is to worship God. And they didn't succumb to the devastation of their surroundings. Okay? They were proactive in their outlook towards life. So as we saw an example previously, they did not quietly accept defeat. When they were no longer allowed to pray in a mosque, they prayed covertly in churches. They adapt to their situation. And they spent their time infused with the remembrance of God. Okay? If you look at the manuscripts in more detail, we don't have much time in this presentation. But like I said, they provide very high quality of religious education. These are not hastily written notes. They were detailed, they were structured, and they were thought out. And it really speaks to the Moriscos and their unwavering commitment to their faith during trying times. Now let's look at American Muslims in comparison. More in the way things are without prompting change. So we are all products of our environment. So we are all subject to the 24-hour news cycle, and it keeps us informed, but it also has a paralyzing effect, where we consume so much media, we render ourselves incapable of taking action and responding to what we're seeing. Okay? We subject ourselves to information overload every single day, and it's not healthy. And because we subject ourselves to information overload, we become passive recipients of our life circumstances. So an example of this would be our political presence in this country. So by this, I don't mean the exceptions like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, we all pray for her success. But I'm talking about generally. The political scenes, as in relation to Muslims, is easily overlooked. Our stances are reactive in nature, okay? We define ourselves in terms of who we are not. We have spent so little time defining who we actually are. And the last point is that we view religion as a part-time commitment. Like I mentioned earlier, this is just a result of living in a secular society. Relegation of religion to a second-class status. So what are the lessons that we learned from this? The first and foremost, the lesson that we learned is that we should study our history. It's rife with examples of hope and resilience, which are in very short supply during these trying times. So we need those lessons of hope and resilience. We need that momentum to carry us forward. And then we should situate ourselves within the greater context of Islamic history, which spans over 1400 years. So that means we need to humble ourselves, we need to learn from those who came before us. We are not unique in our suffering. Okay, so an example of this would be Muslims are dealing with the expansion of the carceral state. Now, generally, immigrant Muslims, people of South Asian, Middle Eastern origin, would like to think that this started 19 years ago. But that's not the case. The carceral state has existed for decades, and Black Muslims have been dealing with it. So there are examples from our past, which will help us in our present, if we only took the time to learn from them. Next. We are subsumed by an unequal work-life balance. So whereas the Moriscos spent their time, infused with the remembrance of God, can the same really be said for us? So we should remind ourselves of our priorities, and we should be conscious of how we spend our time. And the last point, consumers versus citizens. So the unfortunate result of being inundated with the media cycle all the time is that we mistake awareness for action, and awareness is not a substitute for action. So we should engage critically instead of mindlessly consuming news media, is what I'm trying to say. Right? Because we do feel the sense of accomplishment once we have learned about different things going on around the world, but we should ask ourselves, is it really enough to just know about them without actually prompting change? So to wrap things up, I'd just like to say that we should understand that our struggles are unique. Everyone's struggles are unique for the place and time, but there is always guidance. There is divine guidance, and there's even guidance if we look to our past. So that concludes my speech, and thank you very much.
That's it? More. Yeah, she deserved it, to be honest, inshallah. Two things that I like the whole speech, but to be honest, what stayed there, the first thing is the comparison that you made between the Moriscos and the Muslims in America. That's a very good comparison, actually. It has a lot of information that we need to realize and to notice during our daily basis life. The second thing is the statement that I like the most is when you said we're spending a lot of time, or most of our time, by defining who we are not. But we should actually do the opposite, who we are. That's what we should say and do and act upon. Jazakallah khair, thank you very much. And now we're gonna go to the, for me, this segment is the most that I love. Especially with Brother Asad Koshal, our president. Let's move to the table topic with Brother Asad Koshal.
Assalamu alaikum. This is on, right? Okay. Inshallah, I have a series of questions. I will stay on this microphone, and inshallah, you come and do things. And this is meant to be very interactive. And so let's inshallah proceed. I put the theme for today. What are beer muscles? Okay. What are beer muscles?
Is it six packs?
Six pack, very good. Okay. Yeah, if you're online, please shout out too. You can Google it. I'll let you Google it. Go ahead. You can take out your phones. I won't see it as a sign of disrespect to the speaker if you're on your phones. Google beer muscles, because then you'll remember it. Akil, Google beer muscles. Okay, sure. I can't move on if you don't know what beer muscles are. Okay, first Brother Aslam and then Uzair. Go ahead.
Did you Google it? No, I already. So you knew.
No,
I Googled it.
Okay.
Brother, I said we're in a masjid. And we're talking about beer muscles.
Yeah.
Which masjid in the United States is gonna let you get away with this? Mashallah. Oh, let's talk about, sorry, wrong word. Wrong word, wrong word. Our mom is here too. Beer muscles, a noun meaning an aggressive attitude resulting from consumption of an alcoholic beverage. That's all I'm gonna say, because I'm not talking about a protruding stomach.
Okay, Uzair, what are beer muscles?
You get beer muscles when you go to a bar and you drink enough beer to intoxicate yourself. Well, consuming a little bit of beer is intoxicating yourself, but enough beer to dehumanize yourself so that you perform actions that you normally wouldn't if you were intoxicated. For example, you drink so much beer that you start a fight with someone else by maybe taking a beer bottle, slamming it on someone else's head. And so because you're consuming the alcohol, you begin to do things that you normally wouldn't do. Now, there are some people that they don't really need beer muscles, you know, they're just kind of like that. But, sorry, my humor is really dry, but I'm sure you guys get the point.
Okay. 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 In what environment are beer muscles most likely to be displayed? You live in American society, you need to know these things. So in what environment, so Uzair mentioned something. Okay, think a little bit. Someone there has their hand up? One of the sisters? Okay.
Restaurants.
Restaurants, very good. Where else? Pubs, very good. Okay, I'll give you a hint. Think about use of speech for a moment. Sports arenas. Okay, why sports arenas? Why sports arenas? Okay, what's that? No, it's good. We have time for this. So,
So it's mainly sports arenas because the guys, people, they go there, they drink before the game, they drink during the game, and then depending on whether their team wins or loses or not, they drink after the game. If you want a legitimate real life example, there's obviously no tailgating going on at like the Bears games this year, but all you have to do when stadiums do open back up is just drive by a nighttime Cubs White Sox game, because there you'll see people drinking before the game, drinking during the game, fighting in the stands, getting kicked out because you're too intoxicated, potentially slipping and falling off the 300s level, which is the highest, and then drinking after the game.
okay. Okay, very good. Anyone else want to take this up? Sports and beer muscles. Okay, we'll move on.
Because it's very competitive environment.
Very competitive environment. And you're usually with who? Very few people attend a sporting event alone, right?
Right.
You're usually attending with people who are roughly your same age, roughly your profile. So let's just assume there are a bunch of guys who are roughly 22, 25 years old, roughly same age, and they're all drinking. So beer muscles is, the idea is that you, in a normal situation, say if you weigh 150 pounds, you're not going to get into a fight with someone who's 250 pounds. But once you drink alcohol, you think you can beat the 300 pounder. Okay? You think you can fight everybody. That's why you'll see like one person trying to fight 4 people in a sporting event, and a lot of times alcohol is involved. Okay? So consuming beer gives you a false sense of your strength. Okay? It gives you a false sense of what you are capable of doing. So that is beer muscles. Another reason you shouldn't drink. Okay. What are keyboard muscles? You're supposed to, okay. We do these in this way so you come and you understand concepts, and inshallah, if this way it's being described, inshallah, you'll never forget it. So what are keyboard muscles? Okay, Brother Aslam. Okay, first Brother Aslam, then Imam Dardasawi.
We're gonna tag you. I'll take your mic.
No, you can take this one.
So if we use the analogy of keyboard muscles and beer muscles, and keyboard muscles make you feel like you can tackle the 300-pound guy. So you can reach through the keyboard and say whatever you want to whoever you want to. And there's no recrimination, is that the right word? There's no impact to what you're saying because you're hidden behind your keyboard and you're so strong and powerful. You can say anything to anyone.
Okay, mashallah, very good. Can one of the sisters chime in? I'll have Hakeem bring the microphone to you. Inshallah.
I think it's the same thing, saying something and not thinking that you're going to get any comebacks, just freely talking about whatever's on your mind.
I'd like you to come up here, Imam Dardasawi.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, you have to follow protocol. Just because you're the Imam, you can't.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, so I believe the keyboard muscle is to use the keyboard to write down something that in reality you cannot do. When you face someone and you want to, for example, you want to punch him, you're not going to be able to do, but you can punch him by the words that you use because they're covered.
Okay, very good. Both of those are accurate. And so today, the topic is social media muscles. So I was drinking consumption of alcohol today. So keyboard muscles. Anyone else want to take an idea on this? Because I can have a user ID, AFDS, exclude, and I can say things that I probably would never say to someone to their face or in person, where I was actually accountable. So what is worse, beer muscles or keyboard muscles?
Can I go?
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. If I have to kind of choose between beer muscles and keyboard muscles, I would go with the keyboard muscles because you have a lot of freedom to say what you can do. You can get away with a lot, and people on the social media, because you are typing, you can say a lot. You don't really have to face that person, so you can get away with a lot of words. And sometimes you do regret what you say when you are chatting. So I would vote for keyboard muscles. Again, that's not something recommended because you will regret what you say. So thank you.
Okay, very good. I think this brother, yes. Anyone else online want to make a comment? So what is worse? Let's spend 5 minutes discussing this, because this is important for everybody, even for the youngsters. What is worse, beer muscles or keyboard muscles?
I believe keyboard muscles because you don't even, I believe keyboard muscle because you don't have even experienced any consequence that even with beer muscles that person will be beaten bad or something like that. While keyboards has that not much, that consequence on that the harm that these words can affect and even affect more people than these 4 people you're fighting with.
Excellent. Yeah, Brother Kadir.
Assalamu alaikum. I believe keyboard muscles would still be more destructive or more powerful simply because with the beer muscles you will always have a limitation. However strong you might feel about yourself, you can fight so many people or to so much extent, but using your keyboard muscle there is no limit whatsoever. So it's very obvious that without fear of any result, you can impact a lot more people in a much more worse manner with the keyboard muscles.
Excellent. Brother Reyes. Thank you, Brother Kinnear.
Assalamu alaikum. I think beer muscles are worse. I feel like because of it's happening in the public, anyone can see it, and whoever does the beer muscles get hurt a lot, whereas the keyboard muscle does not. Physically can hurt on the beer muscle. Like somebody can try to beat other guy, and other guy with 300-pound muscle, 300-pound muscle can beat 150-pound muscle guy, and he get hurt. Like physically get hurt, and because of beer muscle, not the keyboard muscle. Keyboard muscle can do anything, but more worse, I think, with beer muscle.
Someone else had their hand up? Okay. Anybody else have a comment on this? Aslam, you have a comment? Okay, great. So, how much time do I have, Hakeem? Okay. 2 more minutes. Okay, 2. So, we'll close on this. Alcohol is considered very bad. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, when he goes on Miraj, he's offered 2 things to drink, wine and milk, and he chooses milk. So the Prophet is in the heavens and he chooses milk over wine. Just let that sink in for a moment. That is how bad alcohol is. But basically in this room, we reached intellectual consensus that keyboard muscles are worse than consuming alcohol and getting into a fight. So the internet and these things are very dark places. And they can be very spiritually corrupt. Saying things in anonymity that you would not say, that you would not do, because the moral restraints are lifted. So I really want to emphasize this. This is something I had written maybe a couple of years ago. And I want to emphasize we have to be careful. So crazy conspiracy theories are just not about QAnon or whatever, right? Those groups. And it's very important. If we basically are saying, at least with alcohol, you'll put something physically in your body that alters your senses and sense of intellect, right? Here you haven't done that. Yet the behavior could be more damaging, more long-lasting, and is usually beyond physical. So, keyboard muscles. I was talking to a Muslim mayor of a city, and not of a small town, and he was saying, I said, look, you have to frame this in. He said, these people attack me anonymously, which I don't have the capacity to respond. I said, look, you're in a difficult situation because you are a public figure. But you have to understand this in the context of keyboard muscles versus beard muscles. And it gives them some structure. So we have to be careful, not just for this life, but for the next. And understand, our Prophet ﷺ, the most blessed of all creation, when he goes to the heavens, he's given an option, alcohol or milk, and he chooses milk. That's how bad alcohol is. And yet, in this audience, we're saying keyboard muscles is worse than beer muscles. Worse than the knuckleheads who go with 5-10 of their friends to a Bears game or whatever game and get into a fight and cause physical injuries. Okay, inshallah. So that is table topics for today. Hopefully you benefited.
Thank you very much, Brother Asad. This is very wonderful. I think we're moving quickly to the general evaluator, Brother Ayaz Niazi. Let's give him one. He's over Zoom, but we can do.
Yes. Thank you, brother. I'm doing the journal evaluator role. Just one thing I wanted to, if I could kind of clarify, what I have on paper, I have evaluator 2 is Harisuddin, evaluator 3 is Muhammad Riyaz. Is that the order? Just wanted to clarify. This is what I have in paper. So if you could please give me evaluator number 1 and.
So evaluator number 1 will be Brother Uzair Koshal. Evaluator number 2, Uzair Koshal. And number 3, Sister Asma.
Okay, all right, I'll just make that correction. Number 3 is Sister Asmat. Asma.
Yes.
So Asma is evaluator 3, right?
Yes.
And who's evaluator 4? No evaluator 4, right?
Because we don't have the.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, just verifying that. Okay, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm the journal evaluator. I will start calling the evaluators, starting with speaker number 1. If I can have Uzair to evaluate speaker 1.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Yusuf, today I enjoyed your speech. I know it was on the Netflix documentary, which I still have on my watch list, but I have not watched. You did, where are you? Oh, right there. I thought that was you. Anyway, you did an excellent job at engaging the audience at the start of your speech by asking a question. And it wasn't a yes or no question, it was a question that people had different options, whether it could golf, football, baseball, whatever the case may be. So you did an excellent job at engaging the audience at the start. And you had very good, clean, readable slides. They were not cluttered throughout your presentation. To improve this presentation, I suggest that you maybe show a 20 or 30-second video of some gameplay or something like that, just so that we have a concrete idea of what the sport actually is. And I had also noticed that you were kind of playing with the mic by having your right hand on here, which I also sometimes get nervous while I'm up here, so that's okay too. But try and be conscious about that. And to close my evaluation, I would also suggest that you work on your vocal variety and so on. And the last comment that I have is that you did an excellent job of closing it at the end by explaining to us how it ties in with the culture and different things like that. So with that being said, that's my evaluation for you, and I really enjoyed your speech.
Thank you, brother. Next, I will be calling the evaluator 2 for speaker 2, and he is Ozaid. I hope I'm saying the name correct. Ozaid Kozal. So thank you. If I can have evaluator 2.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So, Brother Aslam, your speech's title was "Your Team Learns by Doing, Not Just by Studying." I thought that kind of caught me off guard, because I thought this was going to be a speech about people have to actually do things in order to learn them. But I liked how you tied in things such as school and what teenagers do on an average day. So getting into the evaluation, you really excelled, I thought, at engaging slides. You used a couple case studies there. You had your own personal one. You used one of the kid, Andrew, who bought the Mustang, saved up for it, and worked. That was a great way to continue to keep the audience engaged, because all of a sudden now the audience is thinking, what's the next slide going to be about? What's the next slide going to be about? While also partially focusing on the current slide. There are also excellent questions that you asked, such as who has worked in high school, or who worked in high school, and then who worked in college or worked through college. You used, like I said, the personal examples, and then you talked about the different skills that you learned working in the pharmacy, in the call center, and then at Montgomery Ward. I think you may want, one thing I think you could improve on is just kind of condensing the slides down, because I counted, well, there's 7 or 8 bullet points on one slide. I think that you could be a bit more concise, be more brief about it, and say, well, what are some things that you learned, right? Like throughout your job, asking the audience a question. And then as I wrap up my evaluation and challenge yourself, I would say go back, look at the presentation, go through the 3 odd jobs, the call center, Montgomery Ward, the pharmacy. Ask yourself, who was one person at each of these jobs that I thought really had a lasting influence on me? Like my dad, he worked at a pizzeria in college. He still to this day tells us stories of his bosses, Gene and Carmine, and how they have had a lasting impact on him. But Alhamdulillah, great presentation presented from multiple different angles that I thought was really engaging, and looking forward to hearing you possibly give this speech again, using some of the feedback and incorporating some of the feedback that was in there. And that concludes my evaluation.
Thank you, Brother Uzaid. Next, I will be calling evaluator 3, who will, and that will be Sister Asma.
Assalamu alaikum. I really enjoyed your speech a lot. I love to travel and learn about different cultures, and I actually have no clue about this, so I learned a lot. I wish it was much longer, and you actually gave a course on this. So you gave great background, great comparison to the past events, and compared it to our current situation. You had good eye contact, gestures, and I loved learning about the sacrifices of the Murstos and how they held onto the rope of Allah even when they were being persecuted. You gave good example of the differences. Our level of religion is not as active as the Murstos as a full-time commitment. There were some great lessons that we learned. We're not so unique in our suffering. We mistake awareness for actions, and we don't actively do, and are passive about making change. Some things that you may want to work on, I think that the slide on the Murstos, maybe lessen the number of bullets and expand it to multiple slides. And to challenge yourself, I would ask if you can give some concrete examples or organizations or people who to support who are actively doing something to make a change. And maybe something that you could do is also engage the audience a little bit by asking them questions, but I think you need a little bit more time for that. But overall, I absolutely loved it. Thank you for coming and sharing your learnings.
Thank you, Sister. Next, I will be calling the timer to give the timer report. So if I can have the timer, Hakeem Hussain.
For speech number 1, my brother, his time allowed was 6 minutes, and he went overtime. He did 6 minutes and 37 seconds. Speaker 2, which was my dad, he had 20 to 25 minutes, and that was the time allowed, and he did 22 minutes, so he was within time. Speech 3, Sister Amina, her time allowed was 15 minutes, and she was within time, like 15 to 20 minutes, and she was within time at 15 minutes and 25 seconds. For table topics, the first speaker was Brother Aslam. He did, the time allowed was 1 to 2 minutes, and he did 40 seconds. He was under time. Table topics speaker 2 was Brother Azer. He did 30 seconds. He was under time. Brother Said did 27 seconds. He was under time. And then Brother Aslam again did 45 seconds under time. Sheikh Ibrahim did 15 seconds under time. Brother Qadir did 41 seconds under time. And Brother Riaz did 35 seconds under time. And the general evaluator, I don't know his name, but the person over Zoom, his time allowed was 3 to 5 minutes, and his actual time was 1 minute and 9 seconds, so he was under time. And evaluator 1, was Brother Azair. He was allowed 2 to 3 minutes, and he was under time at 1 minute and 57 seconds. Brother Said was also given 2 to 3 minutes, and he was within time at 2:25. Evaluator 3, Sister Asma, was allowed 2 to 3 minutes, and she was under time at 1 minute 54.
Thank you, brother. MashaAllah, that was great. And yeah, if I can have the grammarian today, grammarian of the day, Brother Haris Uddin.
All right, the first speaker, Brother Yusuf, you had 3 so's, 2 ums, and 1 like. Overall, it's a big improvement since your last speech. Brother Aslam, you improved a lot as well. You had 4 so's, 1 and so, 2 wells, 1 you know, and 6 uhs and 1 But it's a big improvement for a 25-minute speech. That's pretty good. Third speaker, who was the third speaker? Oh, Sister Amina. You had 6 you knows, 1 You started off the speech saying okay, and then you said okay again later on, and then you also had 6 so's. For the general evaluator, it was there, and Usaid, the first 2 that came up here for the evaluations, all of you were clean. Sister Asma, you had 4 and uhs, and then you had 6 ums during your evaluation. And Hakeem, you had 4 ums and 1 during your timing report. So and run in your family, I guess. And that's my evaluation report. The Toastmaster, I forgot to count your uhs and ums. I'll do it for the next football, inshallah.
Thank you, Brother Haris. Now I will go with my journal evaluation. Great meeting, everyone. I have the first time seen a hybrid meeting. I've just been in my club. We're doing completely virtual meetings. Great job. I think organizing a hybrid meeting with some people online and it is a challenge. So great job in that. I think the speakers were great, how they were talking, and they had so much variety in topics. A lot of interesting table topics was great. Overall, great meeting. Maybe one part to suggest that I would recommend, maybe that if you're doing a hybrid meeting, just keep communicating on chat. So if people have, some people are doing some roles hybrid, online, just so they know the stuff. But overall, great job. Definitely, I'll be looking forward to. And you guys are also welcome to attend the ICW Toastmasters meeting. Also, we do virtual, but great job. It was great hearing everyone. So thank you to you, fellow Brother Toastmaster.
Okay, inshallah. So thank you very much, Brother Yas, for joining us. It was an honor to have you join us. So I think today concludes the meeting. I'll ask Imam Dardasawi to make dua. And our next meeting, I'm sorry, yes? I'm forgetting something? Oh, we have other guests? Okay. Are there any other guests online that'd like to say anything about the quality of the meeting?
One thing I would comment that it is, I really wish that it is when presenters are presenting to share the screen rather than camera.
The slide deck. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, that's very good input to be able to show the slide deck. Yeah, there are technical challenges. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother. Overall, it was a great job. I was just wondering if there's a way to connect a mic directly from, the speaker's mic to the computer so we can hear it better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think, the technical challenges we do need to address. So inshallah, we'll try to do that by next week. I don't want, but I understand that if you were virtual and you couldn't see the slide deck, it would have a big impact on what you were able to follow. Okay, all right. Anybody else, any other guests join us today? Was the meeting worth your time? Okay, inshallah, very good. So inshallah, Sheikh Ibrahim, if you can make dua. Next meeting is a Saturday, 11:30. We did back-to-back because we didn't do last week, it was a Labor Day weekend. 11:30. So please sign up. Riaz will send out the agenda today.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Allah, we ask you to accept all our efforts. Allah, we ask you to grant us Jannah and to gather us all with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in Jannah. Allah, we ask you to forgive all our shortcomings and all our sins. Allah, we ask you to get us closer to you. Allah, we ask you to let us from those who listen to the speeches and benefit from it and reflect in their lives. Allahumma ameen. Allah, make us the real Muslims, those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do actions in their lives regarding their belief. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma ighfir lana warhamna wa tub alayna wa ila ghayrika la takilna. Allahumma aghithna ya mughith warfa' 'anna al-bala'a wal waba'. اللهم برحمتك نستغيث أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين ولا أقل من ذلك سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. We'll see you everyone next week, inshallah. Yeah. Zohar stands at 1:15, right? Yeah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. Ashhadu an la أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح